The Harrow field didn't have a sky. Not really. It had a shroud. A perpetual twilight woven from atomized steel and frozen human breath. A graveyard of ambition that stretched for 1,000,000 kilometers. Here, the ghosts of the Titanomachy War lingered not as spirits, but as silent, tomb-like dreadnoughts and shattered frigates, their metal hides scarred by plasma burns and cannon fire from a conflict a decade dead. This was Kalen's world. He was a scrapper, a bottom feeder in the galactic food chain. But here, in the silence of dead warships, he was a king of rust and ruin. His ship, the Stray Dog, was little more than a cockpit and a cargo claw welded to an oversized engine. But it was nimble enough to navigate the twisted guts of this metallic boneyard. He wasn't a soldier anymore. The consortium made sure of that when they'd honorably discharged him for asking the wrong questions after the siege of Cygnus X1. They'd given him a pittance and a one-way ticket to the Outer Rim, expecting him to drink himself into an early grave. Instead, he'd found a different kind of grave to pick over. His current prize was the wreck of the Indomitable, a Titan-class carrier whose spine had been snapped by a railgun slug the size of a shuttle. He moved through its cavernous, zero-gravity corridors with a practiced ease, his mag boots anchoring him to the deck plating, while his cutting torch spat a silent, brilliant blue flame in the vacuum. The air in his suit tasted of ozone and stale filters, the familiar flavor of his trade. He wasn't looking for standard salvage armor plating or weapon conduits. He was a specialist, a whisper on the scrapper comms who could find and extract the rarest components intact neural interface chairs, pre-collapse AI cores, unbroken cryopods, things the consortium paid a fortune for on the black market, even as they officially condemned men like him for desecrating war memorials. The irony was as thick as the dust on his visor. His handler, a disembodied voice named Silas who existed only as encrypted text, had sent him here with specific coordinates, deep within the Indomitable's medbay. The prize, a prototype autosuture machine, military grade, capable of reattaching a limb in under a minute. A collector's item, a retirement plan. As he sliced through the final bulkhead, the thick steel door peeling away like fruit rind, he saw it. The machine was pristine, sealed in a biocontainment field that still hummed with a faint, residual energy. It was perfect. Too perfect. A prickle of unease ran down his spine, a ghost of the combat instinct he thought he'd buried. This part of the ship was too clean, the floating debris less chaotic than the rest of the wreck. It felt less like a battlefield and more like a staged room. He was about to attach his toe clamp when a proximity alert pinged softly in his helmet. It wasn't Reese, his pilot and lookout, whose transponder signature he knew like his own heartbeat. These were multiple contacts, moving in a coordinated pattern, closing on his position from the main hangar bay. Scrappers weren't that organized. Pirates weren't that quiet. Kalen extinguished his torch, the world plunging into the dim, ambient light of distant nebulae filtering through the ship's wounds. He unslung the kinetic rivet gun from his back, a tool for salvage that could just as easily punch a fist-sized hole through a person's vacuum suit. He was a ghost, melting back into the shadows of a collapsed gantry, his breath held tight in his chest. 5 figures drifted into the medbay, their movements fluid, economical. They weren't scavengers. They were predators. Their armor was matte black, non-reflective, bearing no insignia except for a single, sterile white circle on the shoulder. Consortium cleansers. corporate assassins and deniability agents, the boogeymen the government used to erase mistakes. Kalen's blood ran cold. He'd seen their handiwork before, on colony worlds that had gotten too loud about corporate malfeasance. They didn't leave witnesses. One of the cleansers, clearly the leader, gestured with 2 fingers, and the squad spread out, sweeping the area with advanced life sign detectors. Kalen flattened himself behind a twisted support beam, powering down his suit to the absolute minimum, hoping the wreck's residual radiation would mask his heat signature. "Sweep is clean," one of the soldiers reported, his voice a filtered, toneless rasp. "No other signatures detected. The asset is secure." The leader approached the autosuture, but ignored it, instead placing a hand on the wall beside it. A scanner in his gauntlet glowed green. "The hidden vault is undisturbed. Prep for extraction and sterilize the site. Standard protocol. Any other scrapper crews logged in this sector are to be considered compromised." Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't about the medical tech. It was a decoy. They were here for something hidden behind the wall. He watched as one of the cleansers attached a device to the bulkhead. It wasn't a cutting torch or a breaching charge. It hummed with a low thrum, and the metal shimmered, flowing apart like liquid mercury to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a single cryogenic stasis pod, its viewport frosted over. Before they could retrieve it, a new voice crackled over their comms, laced with static and panic. "Command, we have contact, another scrapper crew. The Gilded Wrench. Just docked at the aft airlock. They're not responding to hails. 3 life signs." The leader didn't hesitate. "Vector team, intercept and neutralize. No transmissions. No survivors. This site remains sterile." 3 of the cleansers broke off, moving with terrifying speed back the way they came. Kalen knew the Gilded Wrench. It was run by a family, a father, a son, and a daughter who were just trying to make ends meet. They were good people. They were also already dead. A moment later, the distant, silent flash of a plasma discharge lit up the corridor, followed by the sickeningly quiet pop of a breached vacuum suit. The leader turned his attention back to the pod, his helmeted gaze sweeping the room one last time. Kalen knew he couldn't stay. He had seen their faces, their methods. He was a liability. He had to run. Slipping away from his hiding spot, he began a slow, painstaking retreat through the mangled infrastructure of the dead giant. He moved not like a man, but like a current of air, using the ship's brokenness to his advantage. He crawled through power conduits, swung across chasms of twisted rebar on his tether, and used the floating bodies of long-dead crewmen as cover. The cleansers were methodical, but he knew the ship's anatomy better than they did. He was a creature of this place. He was nearing the outer hull breach he'd used for entry when his comm pinged. It was Reese. "Kale, what the hell is going on? Consortium cutter just jumped into the system. It's sitting off the Indomitable's bow like a vulture. And I'm picking up encrypted military chatter all over the place. We need to leave. Now." "I'm on my way," Kalen whispered, his voice hoarse. "But we've got a problem. A big one." As he spoke, a white-hot beam of energy sliced through a bulkhead just inches from his head. They'd found him. The hunt was on. The chase was a blur of calculated risks and desperate gambles. Kalen didn't run toward his ship. That was what they'd expect. He ran deeper, towards the ship's ravaged reactor core. He knew the old Titan reactors bled chronoton particles, radiological ghosts that would play hell with their advanced sensors. The cleansers followed, firing precise, disciplined bursts that chipped away at his cover. He could feel the impacts vibrate through the deck plating under his boots. He fired his rivet gun back, not aiming to kill, but to disable. A well-aimed shot sent a coolant pipe erupting in a cloud of frozen crystals, momentarily blinding his pursuers. Another shattered a control panel, showering a corridor in a storm of sparks and shorting out the emergency lighting. He was buying seconds, nothing more. He reached the primary engineering bay, a cathedral of dead machinery built around the inert core. He needed a distraction, something big. His eyes landed on one of the secondary plasma conduits, ruptured but still holding a residual charge. It was a long shot, a stupidly dangerous move. He fired his last rivet into the conduit's magnetic containment ring. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a silent, blinding flash, the stored energy arced out, a massive bolt of artificial lightning that slammed into the far wall, vaporizing a chunk of the hull and the cleanser who had been taking aim at him. In the chaos of the discharge, Kalen scrambled for the new hull breach, a gaping wound that looked out onto the star-dusted void. He saw the stray dog hovering patiently where Reese had left it. He pushed off, firing his suit's thrusters, a tiny speck against the immensity of the dead ship. He was almost there when he saw it, back in the engineering bay, revealed by the arcing energy, a small, secondary control room he'd never seen on any schematic. Its door had been blown open by the blast, and inside, a single terminal was still active, powered by some emergency reserve. A data core sat in the reader, its indicator light blinking a soft, steady amber. He didn't know why, but a gut feeling, the same instinct that had kept him alive at Cygnus X1 screamed at him. That's the real prize. The cleansers weren't just after the pod, they were after the data. In a split-second decision that defied all logic, he reversed his thrust, the G-force straining his muscles. He shot back into the breach, grabbed the data core, and shoved it into a sealed pocket on his suit. Alarms blared in his helmet as the remaining cleanser rounded the corner, rifle raised. Kalen didn't wait. He launched himself back into the void just as a volley of plasma bolts melted the spot where he'd been standing. He slammed into the stray dog's hull, his mag boots clanging against the metal. The cargo claw swung down, enveloping him and pulling him into the cramped cockpit. "Go," he yelled, ripping his helmet off. "Just go." Reese didn't need to be told twice. The stray dog's engine roared to life, the small ship banking hard and accelerating away from the looming wreck of the Indomitable. "Cutters moving to intercept," Reese shouted, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. "They're hailing us." On the main view screen, the sleek, predatory form of the consortium patrol cutter grew larger, its weapon ports glowing with malevolent intent. A calm, female voice filled the cockpit, devoid of any emotion. "Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will be met with lethal force." Kalen looked from the warship on his screen to the data core clutched in his hand. He had no idea what was on it, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. It was a secret the consortium was willing to tear the galaxy apart to keep buried. He was no longer a scrapper, picking at the bones of a forgotten war. He was a loose end, a witness, and in the cold, corporate calculus of the consortium, there was only one way to deal with a man like him: erasure. Reese looked at him, his face pale with sweat. "What did you do?" "Kyle." "What the hell did you find in there?" Kalen met his gaze, the grim reality of their situation settling in like the deep space chill. "I don't know," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "But I think we just started another war." "Fire on my mark," Kalen said, his voice a low growl that cut through the sterile politeness of the consortium's final warning. Reese's hands were a blur across the console, diverting all non-essential power to the engines and the pitifully small mining laser mounted beneath the cockpit. "Mark for what their funeral or ours, he shot back, his gallows humor a thin veneer over raw panic. The consortium cutter was a blade in the darkness, its running lights cold and unforgiving. They couldn't outrun it, and they couldn't fight it. Kalen's eyes weren't on the cutter, but on the holographic star chart of the Harrow field, his mind racing through the metallic guts of the graveyard he knew so well. He saw not a field of debris, but a tactical map of opportunity. "Neither," Kalen said, pointing a finger at a sector of the chart that glowed a faint, angry red. "The cauldron. Get us there." Reese's blood seemed to drain from his face. "The cauldron, Kale. That's a suicide run. That's where the Hecate's wrath went down. Her torpedo bays are still hot. Half the munitions are unstable. One stray particle hit, and the whole sector goes up like a nova." "Exactly," Kalen replied, a grim smile touching his lips. "Mark." Reese slammed the throttle forward. The stray dog lurched, its oversized engine screaming in protest as it shot away from the cutter and dove headlong into the densest part of the wreckage. The consortium vessel, caught off guard by their suicidal audacity, hesitated for a moment before giving chase, launching a spread of warning shots that sizzled past their viewport. The flight through the cauldron was a nightmare ballet. Reese was no longer just a pilot, he was an artist of desperation, throwing the small scrapper ship through impossibly tight spaces. They skimmed the jagged edges of shattered destroyers, their hull screaming as metal scraped against metal. They corkscrewed through the skeletal ribcage of a frigate, its dead crew still strapped into their seats, their helmets turned towards a final, silent horror. The consortium cutter followed, less nimble but far more powerful, blasting a path through smaller debris with its point defense cannons, its searchlights cutting stark, moving shadows across the dead fleet. It was like a leviathan chasing a minnow through a coral reef of razors. "They're gaining," Reese yelled, sweat beading on his forehead as he dodged a severed command tower that tumbled end over end. "They're locking missiles." "Keep her steady," Kalen commanded, his own hands flying across a secondary console, targeting the weak mining laser. He was trying to thread a needle in the heart of a hurricane. "I need a clear shot at the Wrath's primary ordnance bay, port side, just below the bridge." He brought up the schematics he'd memorized from a dozen salvage runs. "There's a cracked torpedo casing. If I can hit the exposed resonance crystal, it should be enough to start a chain reaction. If you miss, we're just giving them target practice." Reese grunted, banking so hard Kalen was thrown against his restraints. "If you don't give me the shot, their missiles will make sure we don't have to worry about missing through the swirling metal and frozen dust." He saw it. The colossal disinter-ruined form of the battlecruiser, Hecate's Wrath, its hull pockmarked with a century of micrometeoroid impacts. Red warning glyphs, faint but still visible, marked the unstable ordnance bays. A missile lock warning shrieked through the cockpit. "Now, Reese, give me the angle." Reese spun the stray dog on its axis, a move that would have torn a lesser ship apart. For a breathtaking second, the ship hung upside down, its belly exposed to the pursuing cutter, but its nose pointed directly at the target. Kalen's finger stabbed the firing stud. A thin, almost insignificant beam of blue light lanced out, a whisper in the silent void. It struck the hull of the Hecate's Wrath, a tiny pinprick of energy against a mountain of dead steel. For a moment, nothing. The missile lock tone became a solid, deafening scream. Then, a ripple. A faint, internal glow emanated from the torpedo bay. A flicker of angry red light that pulsed once, twice. Then all hell broke loose. The torpedo detonated, not with a sound, but with a wave of pure, concussive force that blossomed outwards. It slammed into the adjacent bay. And the chain reaction Kalen had gambled on became a terrifying reality. The entire midsection of the Hecate's Wrath erupted in a silent, expanding sphere of white-hot plasma and shrapnel. The explosion was the wrath of a dead god, a firestorm in the void that engulfed everything nearby. The consortium cutter, caught in the blast wave, saw its forward shields flare and collapse. The shockwave hit the stray dog like a physical blow, sending the ship tumbling, every system screaming in protest. Reese fought the controls. His teeth gritted. Jump drive is fried. We're dead in the water. No, we're not, Kalen said, pointing at the view screen. The explosion had created a massive, temporary nebula of superheated gas and ionized particles. A perfect screen. The blast is masking our signature. They think we were vaporized with the rest of it. Reroute power from life support to the jump drive capacitor. We've got maybe 90 seconds before that cloud dissipates. It was the longest minute of their lives. They sat in the dark, the only light coming from the flickering emergency strobes and the dying, beautiful glow of the nebula outside. The air grew thin, the cold of the void seeping into the cockpit. Finally, a single green light blinked on the console. Capacitors charged. Reese gasped, his breath fogging in the cold. Where to... Kalen looked at the data core he'd pulled from his suit. He knew they couldn't go to any civilized port. Their ship's ID was burned. Their faces were now on a consortium kill list, and the object in his hand was the reason for it all. There was only one place in the sector that traded in secrets as dangerous as this one, a place where fugitives and ghosts could disappear. "Take us to the sump," he said. The jump drive engaged with a gut-wrenching lurch, and the starfield outside warped into streaks of impossible color. The Harrow field, with its ghosts and its fire, vanished behind them. The sump wasn't on any official star charts. It was a hollowed-out C-type asteroid nestled in the heart of a dense nebula that scrambled long-range sensors. A tumor in the belly of the outer rim. From the outside, it was just another dead rock. Inside, it was a vertical city of sin and secrets, lit by the neon glow of noodle bars, the flicker of black market textiles, and the cold, blue light of data brokerages. There were no laws here, only transactions. The stray dog slipped through a magnetically sealed entrance, its transponder broadcasting a stolen identification code Kalen had bought years ago for just such an emergency. They landed on a corroded docking platform slick with grime and leaked hydraulic fluid, the air thick with the smell of recycled oxygen, exotic spices, and desperation. They were just another piece of driftwood washing up on a forgotten shore. Kalen left Reese to guard the ship, pulling the hood of his jacket up to obscure his face. He moved through the crowded, multi-level warren of the sump with a purpose. He passed augmented enforcers with glowing optic nerves, disgraced corporate scientists selling forbidden gene mods, and grizzled mercenaries drinking away memories of wars no one would ever read about. This was the underbelly of the galaxy, the collection of loose threads the consortium was constantly trying to snip. His destination was a small, unassuming kiosk tucked away in the deepest, darkest level of the asteroid, a place known only as the Ghost Archive. A single holographic sign flickered above it, a stylized E. The proprietor was a woman named Ilara. She wasn't just a data slicer, she was a digital necromancer. It was said she could resurrect data that had been wiped clean from a drive, pulling echoes and fragments from the quantum foam. She was paranoid, expensive, and the best there was. He found her hunched over a workbench, her face illuminated by the glow of a disassembled data slate. A pair of antique silver goggles pushed up on her forehead. Wires snaked from a port at the base of her skull into the humming console before her. "I'm closed," she said without looking up, her voice a low, melodic hum laced with digital distortion. "I'm not here for a standard decrypt," Kalen said, his voice low. "I have something classified. Consortium Black." That got her attention. She slowly lifted her head, and her eyes, one a piercing, natural gray, and the other a complex nest of glowing blue cybernetics, fixed on him. Consortium Black gets people erased. I like my existence tangible. Whatever you have, it's not worth the risk. The price for that kind of trouble starts at a price you can't afford. Kalen didn't flinch. He placed the data core on her workbench. It looked small, insignificant, on the cluttered surface. "It's connected to the Indomitable," he said. "The cleansers were after it." Ilara's cybernetic eye whirred, its lenses clicking as she focused on the core. The Indomitable was a name that still carried weight, a ghost that haunted the consortium's victory parade. "They don't send cleansers to pick up old war souvenirs," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She reached out a slender, verbose, metallic gloved hand and picked up the core, turning it over. "This is military-grade encryption, layered with biosignatures and quantum locks. It would take me a week just to get through the first firewall." "I don't have a week," Kalen stated flatly. "They killed the crew of the Gilded Wrench just for being in the same sector. They'll be hunting us with everything they have." "What are you offering?" she asked, her gaze sharp, calculating. Kalen paused. He had credits, but credits wouldn't be enough. He had to offer something more valuable, a secret for a secret. You've heard the official story of the siege of Cygnus X1, right, that the 77th Legion broke and ran? And that's why the line collapsed. Ilara nodded slowly. "It's in every history file. The cowards of Cygnus." "I was there," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was a sergeant in the 77th. We didn't break. We were ordered to pull back. Our commanding officer, General Torvin, received a direct order from High Command to cede the sector. They sacrificed the entire Cygnus colony, 3 million civilians, to draw the enemy fleet into a trap. The official story was a cover-up to hide a war crime." Ilara was silent for a long moment, her glowing eye processing the information. A truth like that, a verifiable first-hand account, was a currency more powerful than any credit chip in the sump. "Put the core in the reader," she said, her voice now stripped of its earlier dismissal. And you don't say another word about Cygnus until I know if you're lying. Kalen slotted the core into the port on her main console. Alara's fingers danced across a holographic keyboard, her cybernetic eye glowing brighter as she bypassed the initial security layers with a speed that was both beautiful and terrifying to watch. Code cascaded down the main screen, a waterfall of incomprehensible data. Then, a single file icon appeared, isolated in the center of the display. It wasn't a text file or a schematic. It was a neural log, a direct recording of a person's sensory input and thoughts. The file name was simple, Vealfall. "What is it?" Kalen asked, leaning closer. "It's a black box recording from a high-ranking officer on board the Indomitable during the Titanomachy War." Alara breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "The biosignature on the encryption belongs to Admiral Eva Rostova." Kalen froze. Admiral Rostova was the hero of the war, the woman who had supposedly died a martyr's death leading the final charge against the enemy fleet. Her official portrait hung in every consortium military academy. "That's impossible," he whispered. "She died on her flagship, the Vindicator." "The data doesn't lie," Alara said as she initiated the playback. The screen flickered to life, not with a clear image, but with a hazy, first-person perspective. The sound was distorted, filled with the crackle of a failing comm system and the rumble of distant explosions. A voice, female, calm, and laced with authority, filled the small kiosk. It was unmistakably Rostova's. "The enemy fleet has been drawn in, just as projected. Phase 1 is complete." Another voice, male and strained, replied over the comm. "Admiral, the Cygnus colony is being glassed. We have to." "Hold your position, General Torvin." Rostova's voice cut in, sharp as diamond. "The Vealfall protocol is absolute. The sacrifice is necessary. High Command has already prepared the narrative. The 77th will be our scapegoats. The colony will be our rallying cry. War requires monsters. General, today, we become them." Kalen stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. The voice of General Torvin, his general. The data core wasn't just a secret. It was the truth. The entire war, the foundation of the modern consortium, was built on a deliberate, cold-blooded lie. And he, a disgraced scrapper picking through the bones of their fabricated history, was now the only one alive who held the proof. The recording ended, but the silence it left behind in the ghost archive was heavier than any sound. It was the crushing weight of a truth so monumental it threatened to rewrite a decade of history. Kalen felt a cold, hollow sensation spread through his chest, the phantom limb of a loyalty he thought had been amputated long ago. He hadn't just been a soldier, he'd been a believer. He'd mourned the fallen at Cygnus X1 and cursed the cowards of his own legion, never once suspecting the betrayal came not from his brothers in arms, but from the gods of war themselves. Admiral Rostova, the celebrated martyr, was a butcher. General Torvin, his commanding officer who had vanished after the war, retired in disgrace, was a pawn in her grand, horrific design. The entire Titanomachy War, the conflict that had forged the consortium's unassailable authority, was a meticulously engineered atrocity. "Monsters," Kalen whispered, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Alara leaned back from the console, her cybernetic eye retracting its lenses with a soft click. The usual cynical detachment she wore like armor had been replaced by a look of profound gravity. "This isn't just a secret, Kalen," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is a foundation stone. You pull this out, and the whole temple of the consortium comes crashing down. They won't just hunt you, they'll declare a crusade against your memory." He knew she was right. This was no longer about survival. Possessing this data was a death sentence, but keeping it silent felt like a betrayal of every soldier who had died believing the lie. He looked at the data core, still blinking its soft amber light, an unholy relic. "Can you make copies?" he asked, his voice hardening with a resolve he didn't know he had. "Authenticated copies. Something they can't dismiss as a forgery." Ilara's organic eye narrowed. "Copies mean dissemination. Dissemination means exposure, for you and for me. That wasn't part of our deal." The deal changed when Rostova's voice came out of that speaker. Kalen countered, his gaze locking with hers. "This is bigger than my life or your anonymity. You live in this cesspit, trading secrets to stay free. Well, this is the secret that underpins the entire system that keeps places like the sump in the shadows. This is the truth that could set everyone free or get them all killed." He saw the conflict in her eyes. She was a creature of the gray spaces, of the whispers and shadows. To bring something like this into the light was to invite the sun, and the sun burned. "It would take time," she said, her tone shifting from resistant to speculative. "To properly layer the authentication, I'd need to embed it with quantum signatures that can't be replicated, cross-reference it with unsecured comms chatter from the war that I've archived over the years. I'd need to make it undeniable." "How much time? A full cycle?" "Maybe more. And I'll need resources. Access to a high-energy particle siphon, a ghost splicer for the quantum entanglement, things that aren't easy to find, even in the sump." "Get me a list," Kalen said without hesitation. "I'll get you what you need." As he turned to leave, Ilara's voice stopped him. "Kalen, if you do this, you're not a scrapper anymore. You're an insurgent. You're a symbol. And the consortium has a special kind of death reserved for symbols." He looked back at her, the neon glow of the sump reflecting in his tired eyes. "They already killed the man I used to be. The least I can do is make sure they remember why." Returning to the stray dog, he found Reese pacing nervously in the cramped cockpit, a plasma pistol clutched in his hand. "Where the hell have you been? Every bounty hunter and information broker in this rock has been pinging my comm, asking about the scrapper who pissed off a consortium cutter. Our faces are already being broadcast on the shadow nets. There's a 5 million credit bounty on our heads." "It's about to get a lot higher," Kalen said, dropping Ilara's list of required components onto the console. "We're going shopping." Reese scanned the list, his eyes widening. "A particle siphon, a ghost splicer kale. This is top-tier black market tech. The kind of stuff that gets you a life sentence in a labor mine just for asking about it. This would cost everything. We don't have that kind of money." "No," Kalen agreed, "but I know who does." His plan was reckless, a desperate gambit born from the ashes of their old life. There was only one entity in the sump with the resources and the audacity to trade in such high-stakes hardware, a crime lord named Volkov, a corpulent, bioengineered monstrosity who ran his empire from the opulent penthouse of a repurposed ore hauler permanently fused into the asteroid's core. Volkov had a reputation for being ruthless, but he had one weakness, a love for the unique and the irreplaceable. Kalen's offer was simple. He would trade the location and schematics of a pre-collapsed derelict, the legendary starliner Seraphim, for the components Elara needed. The Seraphim was a ghost ship, a myth whispered among deep space salvagers, said to be filled with priceless art and untraceable data caches from before the consortium's rise. Most believed it was a fairy tale. But Kalen, from his time in the 77th Legion's long-range reconnaissance unit, knew better. He knew it was real, and he knew exactly where it was. The meeting with Volkov was as tense as a live bomb. They met in a room where the air was thick with the cloying scent of alien incense and the low hum of a personal shield generator. Volkov, a mountain of flesh and chrome, sat on a throne carved from the jawbone of some extinct leviathan, flanked by two genetically enhanced guards who looked more like beasts than men. The ghost of the Harrow Field, Volkov rumbled, his voice a synthesized bass that vibrated in Kalen's bones. You come to me reeking of consortium blood, with a price on your head that grows by the hour. This is either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. I'm here to offer you a ghost of your own, Kalen said, sliding a data chip across the polished obsidian table. The Seraphim, its exact location, its full crew and cargo manifest, and a clear path through the meteor field that has hidden it for a century. Volkov's reptilian eyes narrowed. He picked up the chip, and one of his guards slotted it into a console. Holographic images filled the air, the elegant, sweeping lines of the starliner, lists of priceless artifacts, encrypted financial data from fallen corporations. Avarice gleamed in the crime lord's eyes. A prize worthy of a king, Volkov admitted. But why give it to me? A treasure like this could buy you a new life on a paradise world, far from the consortium's reach. Because I don't want a new life, Kalen said, his voice cold and steady. I want to burn down the old one. I need a list of components. Untraceable. Delivered within the hour. He slid Elara's list across the table. Volkov studied it, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. This is not the shopping list of a man who plans to run, he mused. This is the toolkit of a man planning to build a bomb. I like bombs. They disrupt the market. You have a deal. Scrapper. But know this the moment this transaction is complete. You are my enemy. The bounty on your head is too tempting to ignore. You will have your hour of grace. Use it wisely. The exchange happened in a flurry of covert movements and coded signals. Reese, using the stray dog's powerful salvage tractor beam, lifted the heavy components from a deserted loading bay while Kalen watched for any sign of betrayal. They worked in silence, the weight of their decision hanging between them. They were no longer just running. They were arming for a war they couldn't possibly win. Back at the Ghost Archive, Elara worked with a feverish intensity. The particle siphon hummed, drawing ambient energy from the sump's main reactor, while the Ghost Splicer began the delicate process of weaving quantum code into the copies of the Veilfall data. Kalen stood guard at the entrance, his rivet gun in hand, every shadow looking like a threat. He could feel the sump turning against them. The whispers were growing louder. Volkov's hour was almost up. It's done, Elara finally said, her face pale with exhaustion. She handed him a small, featureless black chip, 5 authenticated copies. The originals are on this chip. The moment this is broadcast, there's no going back. The data is a virus. It's designed to self-replicate across any network it touches. Once it's out forever. Just then, Reese's voice crackled over Kalen's private comm. "Kale, we've got company. Volkov's goons are sweeping our level. And worse, a consortium dropship just landed on the upper platforms. It's the cleansers. They're here." Kalen looked from the chip in his hand to Ilara. "Where's your back door?" "There is no back door," she replied, a grim finality in her voice as she began wiping her systems. "This archive is my tomb. I don't run, but you need to. There's a maintenance shaft behind that power conduit. It leads to the ventilation system. It'll be a tight squeeze, but it'll get you to the lower levels, near the waste reclamation plant. There are unregistered garbage scows leaving every hour. It's your only chance." "What about you?" Kalen asked. Ilara gave him a small, sad smile, her cybernetic eye glowing softly. "I'm a ghost. Remember, it's time I lived up to the name." She handed him another data chip. "This is for you. A little something extra for bringing me the story of a lifetime. Now go. Raise some hell for me." Kalen didn't argue. He gave her a final nod of respect, a silent acknowledgement of her sacrifice, and slipped into the dark, narrow shaft. The last thing he heard before the sound of plasma fire erupted from the archive was Ilara's calm, melodic voice humming an old, forgotten tune from before the war. He crawled through the suffocating darkness, the sounds of a firefight above him, the future of the galaxy resting on the small, black chip clutched in his hand. He was alone, hunted, and running out of time. The bomb was built. Now he just had to find the right place to detonate it. The maintenance shaft was a coffin of corrugated steel, thick with the smell of ozone and recycled air. Kalen moved through it on his belly, the rivet gun scraping against the narrow walls, the sounds of the sump's chaos, a distant, muffled roar above him. Every meter was a struggle against claustrophobia, a battle fought in darkness and dust. He could hear the methodical sweeps of the cleansers, the heavy thud of their mag boots on the deck plating, and the panicked shouts of Volkov's men as they were cut down with ruthless efficiency. Ilara had bought him time, paid for in blood and fire, and he wouldn't waste it. He finally reached a ventilation grate, its metal slats filmed with years of grime. Peering through, he saw the underbelly of the sump, the waste reclamation plant. It was a vision of industrial hell, a cavernous space filled with colossal machinery, conveyor belts hauling mountains of scrap, and rivers of glowing, toxic sludge. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the landscape of refuse. It was chaotic, loud, and the perfect place to disappear. His comm crackled with a burst of static. Kyle, are you there? I'm reading weapon signatures converging on your level. Talk to me." Reese's voice was a lifeline in the suffocating dark. "I'm here." Kalen breathed into his wrist comm. "I'm in the reclamation sector. I need a pickup. And I need a diversion. A big one." There was a pause, followed by the sound of Reese taking a deep, steadying breath. "A big one. Right. How about the main fuel depot on the docking ring? A targeted plasma leak should make for some pretty fireworks. It'll draw every gun in this rock, but it'll also start a countdown on our welcome here." "Do it," Kalen said, his voice grim. "Meet me at Outflow 7. It's an old garbage chute that vents directly into space. Be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Reese repeated. Try not to get recycled before then. The comm went silent. Kalen kicked out the grate and dropped onto a narrow gantry overlooking a chasm of moving scrap metal. The noise was deafening, a symphony of grinding gears and crushing pistons. He was home. This was his element-controlled chaos. He began to move. A ghost in the machine, his tattered scrapper's coat blending in with the rust and filth. He vaulted over conveyor belts, slid down chutes of discarded plating, and used the rhythmic slamming of a hydraulic press as cover to cross an open floor. He could see the cleansers now, 4 of them, moving with an unnatural grace through the industrial labyrinth. They weren't using searchlights. Their helmets' advanced optics cut through the steam and shadows, painting the world in shades of thermal and kinetic energy. They were hunting a ghost with the eyes of gods. Kalen knew he couldn't fight them head-on. His only weapon was the environment itself. He scrambled up a pile of compacted cubes, dislodging a loose piece of sheet metal. It clattered down, drawing the attention of 2 cleansers. As they turned, Kalen, hidden in the steam above, used his rivet gun to fire a single, precise shot at the magnetic clamp holding a massive bundle of steel girders suspended from a crane. The clamp sparked, sputtered, and released. Tons of metal crashed down. Not on the cleansers, they were too fast for that, but in front of them, blocking their path and sending a plume of acrid dust into the air. He didn't wait to see the result. He was already moving, sprinting towards a series of massive, grinding gears that powered the primary conveyor. He saw the sign for Outflow 7 just beyond them, a faded number on a corroded wall. He was almost there. A plasma bolt seared the air next to his head, melting a fist-sized hole in the bulkhead. The remaining 2 cleansers had flanked him. They were closing the net. Just as they raised their rifles for a final, killing shot, the entire asteroid shuddered. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the structure, followed by the wail of emergency sirens. Reese had done it. On the gantry above, Kalen saw the cleansers pause, their heads turning toward the source of the explosion. In that moment of hesitation, their mission protocol warring with the sudden tactical alert. Kalen acted. He leapt onto the teeth of one of the giant, slow-moving gears, using its rotation to carry him upwards and over. He landed on the other side, rolling to his feet, and sprinted for the chute. He threw himself into the dark, cylindrical tube of Outflow 7 just as plasma fire stitched a pattern across the entrance. The chute was a steep slick slide into blackness, the stench of a century of garbage filling his lungs. He tumbled out into the void, into the cold, silent embrace of space. For a heart-stopping second, he floated, a piece of human debris among the literal debris being ejected from the sump. Then, the familiar, battered form of the stray dog materialized from behind a chunk of floating ice. Its cargo claw extended. It snatched him from the stars and pulled him into the airlock. The moment the outer door sealed, Reese slammed the throttle, and the ship shot away from the sump, its engines burning hot. "Status!" Kalen grunted, pulling himself into the cockpit. "Jump drive is whining like a kicked dog, but it's holding. The entire sump is on lockdown. Looks like Volkov and the consortium are about to have a very messy divorce," Reese said, a triumphant grin on his face. "You got what you needed." Kalen held up the black data chip. "We got it." He slumped into his chair, the adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. They were alive. They were free. But they were adrift in a hostile galaxy, holding a truth that could either liberate millions or sign their death warrant. As they floated in the relative safety of deep space, waiting for the jump drive to cool, Kalen remembered Ilara's second chip. He pulled it from his pocket and slotted it into the console. It wasn't a complex file. It was a dossier, a collection of consortium intelligence, personnel files, black site locations, Ilara's personal insurance policy. He scrolled through the files, his eyes scanning names and locations, until one file made him stop. The designation was Asset Yorick. The face was one he knew, a thin, hawkish man with eyes that seemed to see right through you. Yorick. He'd been the spotter on Kalen's sniper team in the 77th Legion, a quiet, unnervingly still man who could hold a position for 3 days without moving, a man who followed orders with a religious fervor. The file detailed Yorick's career after the war. While Kalen had been discharged and sent to the scrapyards, Yorick had been recruited into the Cleanser program. He'd become one of their best, a specialist in asset retrieval and liquidation, a hunter. The file contained a final, recently appended note: Asset Yorick activated. Primary target Kalen, formerly of the 77th Legion. Secondary target the compromised Veil Fall data. Protocol erase. No collateral constraints. A chill ran down Kalen's spine that had nothing to do with the cold of the cockpit. This was no longer an impersonal manhunt by a faceless corporation. They had sent a ghost from his past to bury him. Yorick wasn't just a soldier. He knew how Kalen thought, how he fought, how he survived. He would anticipate his moves, exploit his weaknesses. Ilara's final gift wasn't just intelligence. It was a warning. "What is it?" Reese asked, noticing the color drain from Kalen's face. "They sent someone," Kalen said, his voice low. "Someone who won't stop. Someone who believes in the lie." He looked away from the dossier and back to the star chart. His initial plan had been to find a friendly outpost on the fringe, to leak the data slowly, carefully. But Yorick changed the timetable. A slow leak could be contained. A careful plan could be intercepted. They needed to do something loud, fast, and undeniable. He zoomed in on the star chart, bypassing the fringe worlds and moving towards the bustling core of the outer rim trade lanes. His finger landed on a system designated Nexus 7 and its single, glittering station. "Prism," he said. Reese's eyebrows shot up. Prism, that's the communications hub for the whole damn sector. It's the galactic news, the stock market, the central data exchange all rolled into one. It's crawling with consortium security. We'd never get within a light year of it. "We won't have to," Kalen said, a new dangerous idea forming in his mind. Prism is a symbol of neutrality, of the free flow of information. Its primary broadcast antenna fires a wide beam transmission every standard cycle, a data burst so powerful it can't be jammed or blocked. It's meant for deep space colonies, to keep the galaxy connected. They'd have security protocols that would make Ilara's archive look like an open book. Reese argued, "We can't hack it." "We're not going to hack it," Kalen corrected him. "We're going to use it. Ilara's data virus is designed to replicate. We don't need to get into their system. We just need to get the chip close enough to the antenna during a broadcast pulse. We'll attach it to a maintenance drone, a piece of space junk, anything. The pulse itself will act as the carrier wave, frying the chip but scattering the authenticated data across the entire sector in a single, unstoppable burst." It was a plan of beautiful suicidal simplicity. It would be a one-way trip. The moment that data burst went out, Every consortium ship in the sector would descend on them. But the truth would be out. Velfall would be a scar carved into the public record forever. So that's the play, Reese said, the reality of it sinking in. We fly into the heart of the beast and light a fire, hoping we don't get burned in the process. The fire is lit either way, Kalen said, his gaze fixed on the glowing dot that was Prism. He thought of the soldiers of the 77th, branded as cowards. He thought of the millions who died at Cygnus X1, sacrificed for a narrative. He thought of Alara, a ghost in her own archive, and he thought of Jorix, a man hunting him for a cause built on lies. His exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He was no longer running from his past. He was flying directly into it, ready to burn it to the ground. "Set a course for Prism," he ordered. "Let him come." Prism Station was not a place. It was a promise, a jewel of light and data hanging in the black. It was a lattice of interconnected rings and towers, all converging on the colossal, dish-shaped grand antenna that pulsed with the lifeblood of the galaxy. It was a symbol of the consortium's power, a testament to their ability to connect, to control, to broadcast their singular narrative to the furthest corners of space. To Kalen, it was the biggest tombstone he had ever seen, and he was here to write its epitaph. The stray dog approached through a field of commercial traffic, its stolen transponder identifying it as a long-haul freighter carrying agricultural yeast. They were a rust bucket in a river of star yachts and corporate transports, insignificant and invisible. Inside the cockpit, the silence was thick with unspoken fear. Reese monitored their heat signature, running cooling systems so cold that frost began to form on the viewport. Kalen worked with a surgeon's focus, making the final modifications to a standard maintenance drone. He lashed the small, black data chip to its chassis, triple sealing it in a casing designed to withstand the initial energy surge of the broadcast. This tiny machine, no bigger than his torso, was the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. 5 minutes to the broadcast window, Reese said, his voice tight. Consortium Patrol is making its regular sweep of the antenna's exclusion zone. We'll have a 45-second gap to get the drone in position. It'll be enough, Kalen said, running a final diagnostic. He looked at the drone, at the chip. He was about to set fire to the world on the word of a ghost and a dead admiral. He felt a sudden, crushing wave of doubt. What if Jorix was right? What if this truth only created more graves, more orphans, more scrappers picking over the bones of a new war, as if summoned by his thoughts? A proximity alert chirped weakly. It wasn't a patrol. It was a single, small contact, moving fast, its energy signature masked, almost non-existent. "What is that?" Reese whispered, zooming in on the sensor display. The contact wasn't broadcasting any identification. It was a phantom. "It's him," Kalen said, a cold certainty settling in his gut. The phantom resolved itself on their view screen. It was a ship he'd only seen in classified schematics, a Cleanser-class interceptor, the Spectre. It was a sliver of matte black alloy and sharp angles, a scalpel designed for silent, surgical strikes. It wasn't armed for a brawl, it was armed to kill. A private comm channel opened, encrypted with a code Kalen hadn't heard in over a decade, the call sign of his old sniper team. "Pathfinder 1, this is Pathfinder 2. Stand down." Jorix's voice was exactly as he remembered it, calm, flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice that had once guided his aim, the voice that had confirmed his kills. "It's been a long time. Jorik," Kalen broadcast back, his knuckles white on the console. "Not long enough. You're chasing a ghost. Kalen, this truth you think you're serving, it's a disease. It will rot the galaxy from the inside out. More people will die in the chaos that follows than were ever sacrificed to win the peace. A peace built on the bones of 3 million civilians and the honor of an entire legion isn't peace," Kalen shot back. "It's a cage." "And you think breaking the cage is freedom?" Yorik's voice was laced with a chilling pity. "You'll unleash anarchy. You're burning down the world to prove its foundations are cracked. I am here to offer you a choice. Surrender the data. You and your pilot will be given a quiet retirement. No one else has to die." "Tell that to the crew of the Gilded Wrench," Kalen snarled. They were a necessary casualty in containing a threat, just like Cygnus was. Some people don't get to have a choice. Some people have to serve the greater good, even if it costs them everything. You used to understand that. "Sergeant." The Spectre moved, not with aggression, but with terrifying precision, positioning itself between the stray dog and the grand antenna. The broadcast window was 2 minutes away. "He's not trying to kill us," Reese realized. "He's trying to stop us. He wants the chip intact." "Then we force his hand," Kalen said. "Reese, get me to the antenna. No matter what." What followed was not a dogfight, but a deadly game of chess played at thousands of kilometers per hour. Reese, using his intimate knowledge of scrapper tactics, dove towards the station's superstructure, weaving the stray dog through a forest of communication relays and maintenance gantries. Jorik followed, his movements impossibly fluid, his shots not aimed at their cockpit or engine, but at their maneuvering thrusters, their sensor arrays. He was dissecting them, piece by piece. "He's herding us away from the antenna," Reese yelled as an ion blast shorted their portside thrusters. "I can't shake him." "Then don't," Kalen said, his eyes on the countdown timer. 1 minute. He grabbed the drone. "Get me as close as you can to that primary coolant vent. I'm going EVA." It was insane. He would be a sitting duck, but it was the only move Jorik wouldn't expect. Reese banked the crippled ship hard, scraping their hull along a service conduit and spinning them into the shadow of one of the antenna's massive support arms. For a few precious seconds, they were out of Jorik's line of sight. Kalen was already in the airlock, his helmet sealing with a hiss. He didn't have a full vacuum suit, just a breather mask and his worn leather jacket. He would have minutes, maybe less, before the hard vacuum and the cold killed him. The outer door opened, and the universe exploded in silence. He pushed off. The maintenance drone clutched to his chest. He could see the Spectre rounding the support arm, its weapon ports glowing. 30 seconds! He fired the drone's thrusters. The small machine shot away from him. A tiny silver arrow aimed at the heart of the galaxy's nervous system. He saw Jorik's ship shift its aim from the stray dog to the drone. But it was too late. The grand antenna began to glow, a soft blue aura building to an incandescent brilliance as it prepared to fire its galaxy-spanning pulse. The drone reached the focal point just as the wave of pure data and energy erupted. The universe turned white. The drone, the chip, and the truth it carried were atomized, woven into the very fabric of the broadcast. The Veilfall data was no longer a file on a chip. It was an echo in the stars, a ghost in every machine, traveling at the speed of light to every colony, every ship, every listening post in the sector. Back on the bridge of the dying stray dog, Reese watched the energy wave wash over them. Every screen in the cockpit flickered and filled with a single SOAG, stark image, the Veilfall insignia, followed by the clear, calm voice of Admiral Rostova ordering the sacrifice of Cygnus X-1. It was out. It was done. But the Spectre was still there. Its mission had failed, but its protocol remained. Erase. It turned. Its main cannon charging. No longer a disabling shot, but a killing blow. "Kyle," Reese whispered, his hands frozen on the dead controls. Kalen, floating in the void, his lungs burning, saw the enemy ship turn on his friend. He had done what he came to do. He had honored the dead. Now, he would protect the living. With the last of his strength, he pushed himself off a floating strut, a slow, deliberate trajectory that would take him directly into the Spectre's path. Yorick's voice, strained for the first time, crackled over his open comm. "Kalen, what are you doing? Get out of the way." But Kalen was no longer listening. He was a sergeant again, standing between his men and the enemy fire. He closed his eyes, a strange sense of peace washing over him. The lie was dead. He could finally rest. The Spectre's cannon fired. The world dissolved into a silent, painless light. Reese, helpless in the cockpit of the stray dog, watched Kalen's body and the consortium interceptor vanish in the same blinding flash. Kalen's final desperate act had caused Yorick to fire prematurely, the blast grazing the antenna's power core. The resulting feedback loop had consumed them both. Two ghosts of the Titan-Nomaki War, consumed by the light of the truth they represented. Reese was alone, adrift in the wreckage of their victory. But he was alive, and he was a witness. In the days that followed, the galaxy fractured. The Veilfall broadcast was a virus of truth that no firewall could contain. On 100 worlds, riots broke out. On 1,000 ships, crews mutinied. The consortium's carefully constructed narrative crumbled to dust in a single cycle. A civil war erupted, not of fleets and armies, but of ideals, fought in newsrooms and back alleys, between those who clung to the comfort of the lie and those who embraced the painful chaos of the truth. Years later, when the dust had settled and the first consortium was just a cautionary tale in the history books, Reese, now an old man, would stand before a simple monument in a quiet corner of the newly formed Alliance of Free Worlds. It wasn't a grand statue of a hero. It was a life-sized, rust-colored sculpture of a small, battered scrapper ship, the Stray Dog. There was no name on the plaque, no mention of Kalen or the 77th Legion. There was only a single, short inscription, taken from the final, garbled transmission from the ghost archive of the sump. "Raise some hell for me." The children who played in the shadow of the monument didn't know the specifics of the war, but they knew the story. They knew that once, the galaxy had been ruled by a lie, and a single, stubborn man who believed in ghosts had flown into the heart of a star to burn it away. His name was rarely spoken, but in the silence where the lies used to live, he was remembered.